My brother's wife was laughing when I walked through the front door. Not the nervous kind of laugh. Not the kind that apologizes for itself. She was laughing the way people laugh when they think they've already won. Head tilted back, hand on my brother's arm, completely at ease in a house that I had bought. She stopped when she saw me. My brother turned around. The smile didn't leave his face right away. It sort of drained, like water going down a sink. Slow, then all at once. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table with a tissue in her hand. My father was standing by the window with his arms crossed, and I could see from across the room that his hands were shaking. I set my bag down by the door. I didn't say anything yet. I just looked at my brother and let the silence do what it needed to do. That moment, that specific moment where the room went completely quiet, is the one I keep coming back to. Not because it felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like grief and anger and something I don't have a clean word for. But I keep coming back to it because it was the first time in 32 years that I walked into a room and my brother did not have the upper hand. I want to tell you how we got there. I am 31 years old. I work in commercial real estate law in Toronto. I have a one-bedroom condo in the annex, a rescue cat named Fig, and a deeply inconvenient habit of solving problems before other people have even noticed there is a problem. My brother is 5 years older than me. He's always been the kind of person who is very good at seeming like he's about to do something impressive. He talks about plans constantly. Investments he's researching. A business he's going to start. A property deal that's almost finalized. He's been almost finalizing things for as long as I can remember. Meanwhile, our parents kept covering his rent, his car payments, the loan he took out in 2019 that he said he'd pay back by Christmas. Christmas came and went several times. I love my brother. I want to be clear about that. I love who he was when we were kids. The one who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I had the flu, and our parents were both working nights. That person is still in there somewhere. I have to believe that. But somewhere along the way, he started confusing our parents' generosity for an entitlement, and the woman he married only made it worse. His wife moved in with that particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. She redecorated my parents' guest room without asking. She started referring to their house as our place at family dinners. Small things. The kind of things that are hard to point to directly without sounding petty. My mother laughed it off. My father went quieter than usual. I noticed. I always notice. The anniversary was my idea, and I had been planning it for almost 2 years. My parents got married in a small ceremony in Vancouver in 1994. They had nothing then. They were both working double shifts, living in a one-bedroom apartment with a hot plate and a window that didn't seal properly in January. They built everything they have from absolute zero, and they did it together, and they did it for us. My father was diagnosed with early-stage arthritis 3 years ago. My mother has high blood pressure that she manages, but that stresses her out more than she admits. They're getting older. They have earned rest. Real rest. Not the kind where you're still worrying about your son's next crisis from the living room couch. I wanted to give them somewhere that was completely and only theirs. There's a small waterfront community about 2 hours outside of Toronto. Not flashy, not a resort town, just quiet. Mature trees, neighbors who wave, a little independent grocery store run by the same family for 40 years. I found a property there that had been sitting on the market for a few months. A 3-bedroom cottage with a wraparound porch, updated kitchen, gas fireplace, and a view of the water that made me stop breathing for a second when I saw it. The listing price was $489,000. I negotiated it down to $461,000. After the home inspection and legal fees, the final cost came in just under $475,000. I paid cash. I had been saving aggressively since I was 24. No vacations, no renovations to my own place, no new car. Fig eats mid-range kibble. I meal prep on Sundays. My colleagues think I'm boring. I do not care. I also, and this part matters, had the property deed drawn up in my parents' names only. Clean title, no encumbrances. I had a real estate lawyer friend review everything twice. The property tax account was set up in my father's name. Pre-authorized payments arranged from a trust account I'd established specifically for ongoing costs. I had documented everything so thoroughly that a first-year law student could follow the paper trail. This was not an accident. I worked in property law. I knew exactly what I was doing and why. I planned the reveal for their 50th anniversary weekend in late September. I told my parents we were going for a drive to look at fall colors. I told my brother nothing. The drive up was perfect. My mother kept saying the trees were just gorgeous in that specific way she has where she says the same thing 3 times with slightly different emphasis. My father had his window cracked and his elbow out, and he looked, for the first time in months, like he wasn't carrying anything. When we pulled into the driveway, my mother thought we were visiting someone. When I handed her the envelope with the deed inside, she put it down without opening it because she assumed it was a card. "Mom, open it." She looked at me. She opened it. She opened it. She read it twice. Then she put both hands flat on her thighs and stared out the windshield at the cottage and didn't say anything for a long time. My father took the document from her hands and read it. He looked up at me. His eyes were already red. "This is your name on here," he said. "No," I said. "Look again." He looked again. He made a sound I had never heard my father make before, something between a laugh and something else entirely. He got out of the car and walked to the edge of the porch and stood there with his back to us for a minute, and my mother reached over and squeezed my hand very hard without saying anything. We walked through the whole cottage. My mother opened every cupboard. She ran her hand along the kitchen counter. She stood in the master bedroom and looked out at the water. She asked twice if the heating system was new, and I said yes. Forced air, just serviced. My father found the porch swing and sat on it and did not move for 45 minutes. I stayed the first night on the pull-out couch to make sure the baseboards worked properly and that the Wi-Fi reached the back bedroom. I left them a list of local emergency contacts, the nearest walk-in clinic, and the name of the woman at the property tax office who had been incredibly helpful. I had already changed the locks and had 3 sets of keys made. One for each of them, one spare in the lockbox by the side door, combination written down and sealed in an envelope in the kitchen drawer marked "Important." I drove home feeling like I had done something that would last. I did not tell my brother, not right away. My parents called him the next day. I wasn't there for that conversation. From what my mother told me later, his first response was, "How big is it?" His second response was, "Is there parking for an RV?" I should have known then. The first indication that something was wrong came 6 weeks later. My mother called me on a Thursday evening, and I could hear immediately from the way she said my name that something had happened. "I got a call today," she said, "from someone asking about the cottage." I set down my fork. "What do you mean asking about it?" "They said they were interested in viewing the property. They got our number from a listing." I was very still. "A listing?" "Your brother said he was just looking into the market, seeing what it was worth. He said he hadn't made any decisions." I asked her to forward me the callback number. I looked it up. It was a brokerage office in Barrie. I called the listing agent the next morning, identified myself by name, gave the legal address of the property, and asked if they had a current active listing for that address. There was a pause. "Yes," she said. "Listed last week, asking $529,000. The contact for the listing is—" "I know who the contact is," I said. I thanked her and hung up. I want to tell you that I was calm. I want to tell you that I handled the next part with complete composure and no emotion whatsoever. I was not calm. I sat in my car in the parking garage below my office building for a while and breathed very deliberately the way my therapist had taught me. And I said several words out loud that I'm not going to repeat here. And then I called my best friend, who listened to the whole thing and then said, flatly, "He listed your parents' house. He listed my parents' house. While they're living in it. They're not living in it full-time yet. They've been going on weekends. That's okay. What are you going to do?" "I already know what I'm going to do," I said. "I've actually known what to do since the day I signed the deed. Here's the thing about working in property law. You learn very quickly that generosity, if it isn't protected, becomes a target. I had anticipated, not this exact scenario, but something. I had anticipated that having this property in my parents' names would create a situation where someone might try to treat it as a family asset. I had anticipated that my brother, in particular, might try to have some kind of influence over it. So I had done something about that. The deed was in my parents' names only. But I had also had them sign a beneficial interest protection agreement, which I had drafted myself and had notarized, that clearly established that the property was not to be listed, mortgaged, transferred, or otherwise encumbered without the written consent of both original parties, and it contained a clause specific and enforceable that named my brother and his wife as excluded from any decision-making regarding the property during my parents' lifetimes. It also established that any attempt to list or sell the property without proper authorization would be considered an unauthorized disposition of a protected asset. I had been waiting quietly and without pleasure to need this document. I drove to the cottage that Friday night. My parents were there for the weekend. My brother and his wife had apparently driven up that afternoon and were, by the time I arrived, already occupying the second bedroom. His wife's car was in the driveway. Music was on inside. I could see lights in the kitchen. I knocked. My mother opened the door and looked at me with an expression of pure, complicated relief. The kitchen smelled like takeout someone had brought. His wife was sitting at the island on her phone. My brother was leaning against the counter looking at me the way he always does. Like he's calculating something. "Hey," he said. "I didn't know you were coming up." "I know," I said. I sat down at the kitchen table. I unzipped the folder I had brought with me. I took out 3 documents: the deed, the protection agreement, and a printed copy of the active MLS listing with his name in the contact field that I had screenshot and had the brokerage confirm in writing. I put them on the table in a row. I did not raise my voice. "I need you to call the brokerage in Barrie tomorrow morning and have this listing withdrawn," I said. "I also need a written confirmation from them that it has been removed. You can email that to me." My brother looked at the listing. He looked at me. He looked at the agreement. "Where did you get that?" he said. It was not quite a question. "I had it drafted the same week I bought this property," I said. "Mom and Dad signed it. It's notarized. I have copies in 2 locations." His wife put her phone down for the first time since I'd arrived. "This is a family property," my brother said. "No," I said. "It is our parents' property. I purchased it for them. Your name is not on the deed. You have no legal standing to list it, access its equity, or make decisions about it. You can't just— I can read you the relevant section of the agreement if you'd like. It's Section 4, Paragraph 2. It's quite clear." My mother made a small sound from the doorway. I did not look at her because I needed to stay steady. "You think you can control everything," my brother said. His voice was rising now. "You always have to be the one who— I'm not trying to control anything," I said. "I'm asking you to undo something that was legally unauthorized and that, if it had proceeded, could have constituted fraud against our parents' estate." His wife said very quietly, "She's right, you know." My brother looked at her. She shrugged. She had, I realized, known about the listing and said nothing. And now that it was clearly not going to work, she was already recalibrating. The room went quiet. My father, who had been in the back of the house this whole time, walked into the kitchen. He had heard everything. He stood next to me, not in front of me, not between us, just next to me. And he looked at my brother for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My brother's jaw tightened. He pushed off from the counter. He said, "Fine," in the flat, clipped way of someone who is not done, but who knows they have run out of options. He picked up his keys from the counter. His wife gathered her things. They left. The car backed out of the driveway, and the taillights disappeared down the road, and then there was just the sound of the water and the wind and the trees outside. My mother sat down at the table. She picked up one of the documents, looked at it, set it back down. "How long have you had this?" she asked. "Since the beginning," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "You knew." "I hoped I was wrong," I said. "I wasn't, but I hoped." She reached across the table and held my hand for a while without saying anything. The kitchen light was warm. Through the window, I could see the dock and the dark water past it, and one single light from somewhere on the far shore. My father put the kettle on. We had tea. He found a tin of shortbread in the cupboard that I had stocked the week I handed over the keys, and we sat there in the kitchen of their cottage, and we didn't talk about my brother at all. We talked about the neighbors, who had apparently introduced themselves with homemade jam. We talked about whether the porch swing needed a weather cover. My mother said she'd been sleeping better than she had in years. At some point, she said softly, "We should have seen it sooner." "You loved him," I said. "That's not a character flaw." She looked at me for a long moment. "We love you too, you know. We didn't always show it the right way." That's the part I wasn't prepared for. I had prepared for the legal confrontation, the logistics, the documents, all of it. I had not prepared for that sentence. I sat with it in a way I'm still sitting with it now. My brother called 3 days later and asked to talk. I said yes. We talked for almost an hour. I'm not going to share most of that conversation because it belongs to us and because some things don't need to be made into a story. What I will say is that he was honest, for maybe the first time in a long time, about how much debt he's carrying, about how scared he is, about how he had actually convinced himself that the cottage was a family asset and that he was just trying to leverage it strategically. The gap between what he believed and what was real was, somehow, more heartbreaking than the listing itself. I told him I wouldn't take legal action as long as the listing was removed, which it was, confirmed in writing 2 days after that night at the cottage. I told him I couldn't keep being the person who solves the financial problems he creates. I told him that I love him and that loving him doesn't mean I'll keep absorbing the damage. He said, "You sound like a lawyer." "I am a lawyer," I said. He almost laughed. It wasn't funny. It also kind of was. 2 weeks ago, I drove up to the cottage on a Sunday afternoon. My parents didn't know I was coming. I almost turned around twice because I wasn't sure I wanted to interrupt whatever quiet they'd built for themselves up there. But I kept driving. When I pulled in, my father was on the porch with a crossword. My mother was inside at the kitchen table with a library book. I could see her through the window, just sitting there, reading, completely still in that specific way. That means a person is fully at rest. I sat in the car for a minute and looked at that image. I thought about the hot plate and the January window that didn't seal properly. I thought about every double shift they worked. I thought about the shortbread tin and the kettle and my father saying nothing but standing next to me anyway. I got out of the car. My father looked up from his crossword. "You didn't call," he said. "Surprise," I said. He smiled and patted the chair next to him. My mother heard us from inside and came to the door with her book still in her hand. She looked at me the way she looked at me in the car on the day I gave them the envelope, but she was taking inventory of something she didn't want to misplace. We had lunch. We walked down to the water. The trees were past pea color now, but still holding on at the edges, orange and rust, and that particular gold that only lasts a few days before it's gone. A boundary is not a wall. I've thought about that a lot. A wall says, "You cannot come through here." A boundary says, "Here is where I am. Here is what I will protect. Here's what I need you to understand before you take another step. I am not done loving my brother. I am not done hoping he figures it out. But I am done carrying what isn't mine to carry. I bought my parents a place where they can rest. Nobody is taking that from them. I made sure of it before I even handed over the keys. That's the part people don't always see. The quiet work that happens before anything goes wrong. The papers signed, the clauses drafted, the copies made. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't make a good story on its own. But it's the reason my mother was reading in that kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, completely still, completely at rest. And I think sitting on that porch with my father and his crossword and the cold autumn light coming off the water, that exactly this, is what I was saving for. I've been thinking a lot about what it actually means to do something good for someone you love. Not the feeling of it. Not the moment where you hand over the envelope and watch their face change. That part is real, and it mattered to me. But it's not what I keep coming back to. What I keep coming back to is the 2 years before that moment. The Sunday meal preps, the spreadsheets, the evenings I spent reading property law case summaries that had nothing to do with my actual files at work. The quiet, invisible, completely unglamorous preparation that made the gift real instead of just well-intentioned. I think we have this idea that doing the right thing is its own protection. That if your motives are good, things will work out. I used to half believe that too, but I work in property law, and I have watched good people lose things they loved because they trusted that love would be enough to hold it in place. It isn't always. Love is a reason. It is not a mechanism. So I built a mechanism. So I filed the paperwork. I had the agreement notarized. I made 3 copies of the keys and wrote down the combination and sealed it in an envelope and put it in the kitchen drawer. None of that was romantic. None of it felt like a gift in the moment I was doing it. It felt like a homework, but it was the homework that meant my mother got to sit in that kitchen on a Sunday afternoon and read her library book in complete stillness, and nobody could take that from her. What happened with my brother is not a story about a bad person. I've thought about that a lot too. He is not a villain. He is someone who spent years being bailed out and who eventually stopped being able to tell the difference between what was offered and what was owed. That's not an excuse, but it is a cause. And causes matter if you want to understand anything beyond the surface of a situation. The thing that I keep trying to articulate, to myself mostly, late at night when I'm not sleeping well, is that the choices we make quietly, when no one is watching, are the ones that actually determine what happens later. My brother made small choices for years. So did I. His led to a listing in Barrie that I had to have removed. Mine led to a document that made that removal possible without a single raised voice. I'm not saying I'm better than him. I'm saying that discipline and forethought are not personality traits you're born with. They are habits you build, one decision at a time, usually in ways that feel completely thankless while you're doing them. You skip the vacation. You read the clause. You make the copy. You file it somewhere safe, and you hope you never need it. Sometimes you need it. I don't think my brother is done figuring himself out. I genuinely hope he isn't, because the alternative is sadder than I want to think about. What I know is that I cannot pause my own life waiting for him to arrive at a version of himself that makes better choices. That's his work to do. I can love him from a distance that protects us both. My parents are sleeping better. My father does his crossword on the porch. My mother has a library card from the nearest branch, and she's already on 3 waiting lists. I drove up last Sunday and sat with them in the cold autumn light, and I thought, this is what I was saving for. Not the cottage, not the deed. The ordinary, quiet, unhurried Sunday afternoon of 2 people who spent 50 years building something and finally have somewhere safe to rest. That's what good judgment looks like, I think. Not dramatic, not loud, just the right thing, done early enough to matter, held together with patience and paperwork and a lot of very boring Sunday evenings. It's enough. It is more than enough.